This week marks the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, but most black women could not actually vote until decades later. In the words of my favorite philosopher, Chris Rock from Head of State, that ain't right. On this historic centennial, we are celebrating the milestone and exploring the long struggle for full equality. Adriana Diaz reports from Chicago, where she spoke with generations of women about the past, the present, and the future in the fight for women's rights.
In Illinois, women had the right to vote in national and municipal elections before the 19th Amendment, making this the first state east of the Mississippi River to grant partial suffrage to women. But in 1915, here at the Art Institute of Chicago, women advocated for national voting rights. They had a banner that said, "We demand an amendment to the U.S. Constitution enfranchising women." But not all women were included.
Can you read what that sentence says?
Jim Crow laws and other barriers made it nearly impossible for black women to exercise their legal right to vote. And Native American and Asian women often faced citizenship questions when they went to the ballot box.
It was kind of a victory for white women and still a struggle for women of color.
Michelle Duster is the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells, an investigative journalist, an anti-lynching crusader, and a fierce suffragist. It's amazing to think that she walked up these various steps. We met outside the historic Chicago home where Wells lived with her family. What is the pride that you feel being the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells?
I'm honored to be related to somebody who's contributed so much to our country.
Born into slavery in 1862 Mississippi, Wells spent her life championing justice and equality. In 1884, at just 21 years old, she was on a train and refused to move to the colored car. Then she sued the railroad. It's almost as if she was Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks wasn't even born. She was Ida B. Wells before Rosa Parks was Ida B. Wells Jr.
Women had deeper freedoms in mind.
For women of color, the struggle for full voting rights continued for decades after Wells' death. Until finally, at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law in 1965. But still, barriers remain today.
Are you registering for the first time? Yes.
Okay. The League of Women Voters is on the front lines of that fight, combating voter suppression and opposing discriminatory voter ID laws.
Reach out to everyone you know.
Among its ranks are League members Lolly Watt and her 23-year-old daughter, Leah.
I think it's more critical than ever, and that has really focused us on making sure that every voter gets to vote how they want, safely, and in an informed way.
The right to vote is something that Watt, an immigrant from India, does not take for granted.
As a naturalized American, I made a decision to be American, right? I felt I was joining a country which was working to be as good as it could be. And that's what keeps me going. It's like I can actually have an impact in this country.
As you look toward the presidential election, what are the concerns that you have as you try to get out the vote?
Voter suppression is a huge concern because there's an easy way with the pandemic and COVID to say we're shutting down all these polling stations for safety. But then you look at the ones that are being shut down and it's kind of clear voter suppression at work. The continued fight to defend every citizen's right to have an impact through voting is the lasting legacy of American suffragists. The monument will be here?
Yes.
Like Ida B. Wells, her great-granddaughter hopes to create a permanent symbol of inspiration for future generations. For many, many years, only men could vote. Like these young cousins, who we found near those same Chicago steps where suffrage leaders stood more than a century ago.
I think it's incredible that all the women can come together to get what they want and what they believe they deserve in this country, and I'm so proud of that.
So is everybody here going to vote eventually?
Yeah.
When you're 18?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those girls give us hope for our future. And honoring our past, last year, this street was renamed Ida B. Wells Drive. It's the first major street in Chicago to be named for an African-American woman. Her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, was of course part of that effort. She's also written several books about Wells. The latest will be released next year by Simon & Schuster, a division of Viacom CBS. And I just love the title, Ida B. the Queen. Gayle, Anthony.
Oh, gosh. Adriana, I just love your story. And I love Michelle Duster, the great-granddaughter, when she said, oh, let's put this in perspective. Rosa Parks was Ida B. Wells Jr., not the other way around. And it's so interesting how much we take for granted. That's why this story is so important, to let young girls know what people went through so we could all have the right to vote.
Absolutely, and we all have to exercise that right that so many people fought for all of us.
Yes. All right, 74 days. We all get the chance to go to the polls. Thank you, Adriana Diaz. Good to see you.